Hey guys, Nick from Timepieces here, and on today's video, I want to talk about something really interesting, and that's how time shows up in art in different mediums. Besides obviously just collecting watches as a fun hobby, where does the symbolism of time show up in art and music, different things like that? And it was just something really interesting that I thought of as a topic today because we just got gifted this beautiful painting here from a friend of mine who does canvas art. As you can see, it's Rolex, of course, with saying here, time is money, and just something that as I was hanging up this morning, really wanted to discuss with you guys. So, how does time show up as a symbol? I think we should start with the obvious. Time in art itself, time represents everything from mortality to memory. And I'm not a huge art enthusiast myself, but I know some pretty famous and popular artists, guys like Salvador Dalí, and that persistence of memory that he created. You'll see something, those famous paintings with the melting clocks. They weren't just surreal. I think that they were a statement on how, time distorts pretty much everything, in dreams, and of course, nobody likes to think about it, but, death, and it makes me not just see how time shows up in my everyday when it comes to collecting watches, and of course doing this as a job and in my own personal life as a hobby, but where do I see time show up in other mediums? And I think it's important to know that, because I think that once you understand as a seller what you're selling and why it's so important to so many people, I think that you can better connect to the clients. So for me, I really love noticing how time shows up in my own life, and how it's very important to see how it can really change your perspective. And when you look at that painting, like I said, of those melting clocks, the watch in that painting, it's not functional, it's philosophical, and it's there to provoke. So when I look at a painting like that, or when I look at a painting like this, what do I notice about watches and time, and beauty and things like that? For me, when I look at this painting, I see the pinnacle of luxury, and that idea that time is money, the idea that you'll see a lot of people say that, in a lot of sub cultures say that time is money, and they'll say it, but they'll say it nonchalantly. To me, the phrase "time is money" really means that, like, hey, you shouldn't devalue yourself and devalue your time, and basically everyone has a set amount of time on this earth. We never know how long we're gonna have, and where you should prioritize things. In my early 20s, I prioritized building this business, and as I am in my mid and late 20s and into my early 30s, I'm prioritizing other things such as family and building up other aspects of my life. So I think, to me, it's very important to have something like this in my office, because it does really showcase the importance of not just a Rolex, but of time itself. I think that if you fast forward to contemporary art, watches, they do become a lot of status symbols. Artists, and even fashion photographers, in a sense. You'll see, we have a very wonderful photographer that we work with. He's contracted out ETG photos, and just noticing those little details, I think, is an art form in and of itself, and it's something that a lot of people miss. And I think that time in and of itself is a really important concept to really wrap your head around. When you look at, luxury and the idea of luxury, how does it show up in things like music? You have a lot of rappers and contemporary artists, rapping about Richard Milles and rapping about Rollies. And in that regard, that art is expressed in a way that really shows watches to be the pinnacle of luxury. And I think that, there is, a certain place for watches to, be showcased in a lot of different mediums around the world. I think, especially when I look at things like this pop art that we just received as a gift, I think that pop art really embraced watches as part of consumer culture. If I look at this painting again, you'll see things like a beautiful fancy sports car, some awesome shoes here. You have the Nike with the Nike switch, and of course the sports car here on the other end. And I think that really is trained the consumer to associate luxury and watches with, in a sense, mass consumption. But again, here at Taylor Timepieces, I don't necessarily think that has to be the case. I don't necessarily think they have to work in tandem. I think that watches can still be an elegant luxury item and not be this mass-produced consumer product. I think, if anything, people like Warhol and other, other artists have really, popularized the consumer culture around things like a Cartier tank, or you look at the Cartier Crash. It is an art piece in and of itself. That misshapen case that just really pops on the wrist, and it's just something that is very elegant and not something you see every day. So, I mean, drawing these parallels is just always something that I find super interesting. I think, like I said, when you look at watches in photography and modern photography, especially editorial and Instagram, watches and wristwatches have become part of that composition, and it's a detail that you just can't really miss. I mean, I think that, in general, I think that a lot of people have, paired that idea of the wristwatch with the concept of time and the concept that we as humans not only have a limited amount of time, but it's how do we express that time. Someone might express that time and might express their culture in a smaller piece that is maybe a dress piece like a Cartier. Somebody might be drawn to the culture of a Hublot or an RM. And that's what I really love about watches is, essentially, no one interpretation is necessarily wrong. It's how you collect and how you build that collection of timepieces. So again, this was just a quick video. If you found any value in it, or if you would like to, learn how to pick up these little pop art pieces, I could always connect you with the associate of mine who paints these and creates these. Please give us a like, subscribe. Again, it was a video that was a little off the beaten path, not necessarily talking about watches in particular, but just talking about how I view watches as an art form and how I see watches in other mediums like music or paintings and drawings and things like that. Again, I really appreciate you guys giving it a listen, and I hope to see you in the next one. Thanks. Bye-bye.